These remote Inca ruins rival Machu Picchu. A trek high in the Peruvian Andes reveals dazzling ancient buildings, stellar views, and mysterious llama art. Llamas seem to graze everywhere in Peru's mountains, but none of them are quite as memorable as the herd at Chaquiquorao, a sprawling pre-Columbian archaeological complex in the southern Andes. Here, white rocks embedded in the walls of gray schist stone terraces depict 24 llamas, impressing tourists and archaeologists alike. There is nothing else like this in the Andes. It was an artistic innovation that occurred prior to the 16th century and was never repeated, says Goritumi Echeverria, who specializes in prehistoric rock art and has worked at the site since the llamas were unearthed in 2005. Chaquiquorao, or Choc to locals, is a cousin to the more visited Machu Picchu. Built by the Inca, it includes ceremonial halls, chambers that once held mummies, intricate farming terraces, and hundreds of buildings where ancient peoples worked and lived. The llamas, in a perpetual procession toward the ruins' central plaza where their real-life relatives would have been sacrificed, are the star attraction. The route to the 10-feet-high Chaquiquorao is not for the faint-hearted. It takes most hikers 2 or 3 days to trek there and back, along a 39-mile trail that often hugs the cliffside as the Apurimac River rages below. The route is strewn with rocks and lined with thorny branches, but every stubbed toe and scratched arm is worth the views of the snow-dusted Andes, breathtaking pastures, and enigmatic structures along the way. Chaquiquorao is accessible only by foot. That could change if Peruvian authorities agree on a 2011 proposal to create a cable car to ferry visitors to the base of the ruins. Proponents claim the cable car would increase tourism and bring in revenues without halting trekkers in the process. Opponents argue that the cable car would not only spoil Chaquiquorao, but that it could also make the entire complex collapse. For now, the site's remoteness and the difficulty reaching its ruins help it retain a magical, mythical quality. But will progress change all that? A mythical cradle of gold, Chaquiquorao, translated as Cradle of Gold in Peru's indigenous Quechua language, sits along a route used by pre-Columbian people to move between Andean peaks and jungle lowlands. Both it and Machu Picchu were mapped in the 1910 seconds by American explorer Hiram Bingham, who led 4 expeditions to the area sponsored by Yale University and the National Geographic Society. The two sites have evolved quite differently since Bingham's mapping efforts. By the 1920s, Machu Picchu was heralded as a lost city, causing a spike in tourism. The terrace complex became Peru's postcard to the world, a mountaintop citadel accessible by trail or by a train-bus combination. In 1983, it was inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List, and the number of travelers increased further. In the first 6 months of 2022, the site attracted nearly 413,000 visitors, according to Peru's Trade and Tourism Ministry. Chaquiquorao, in contrast, only received 2,353 trekkers in the first half of this year. That's not the only difference. While most visitors to Machu Picchu transit through the small town of Aguas Calientes, with its plentiful food and lodging, the route to Chaquiquorao lacks many creature comforts. Getting there is, as many prefer, an adventure. Treasures yet to be discovered. As with Machu Picchu, Chaquiquorao shows the progression of Inca construction techniques, beginning with simple stone structures and evolving to finely hewn massive blocks that interlock like puzzle pieces. The heart of Chaquiquorao, with its mummy niches and ceremonial sacrifice platform, is smaller than what tourists see at Machu Picchu, but the complex itself is much larger. Chaquiquorao's size and remoteness mean that much of the site has never been excavated. Nelson Sierra, who operates a high mountain trekking company, Ritasuyo, points to vine-covered elevations rising beyond the central clearing. They are not small hills, but collapsed structures reclaimed by dense vegetation. So much work is still needed here, but restoring it all would be a massive job, he says. As trekkers approach the ruins, the first thing they see are terraces, step-like platforms that turn hillsides into arable land, still used by farmers in highland Peru. Chaquiquorao has miles and miles of them, most still buried. The terraces stretch from the top of the ruins nearly a mile down toward the Apurimac River. Mabel Covarrubias, whose family has lived in the nearby community of Marimpata for more than a century, says her ancestors used the terraces for planting and pasturing livestock until the 1980s. Work on the terraces led archaeologists to the stone llamas. Their white stone bodies stand in stark contrast with the gray walls, suggesting depth and dimension. They reflect the sunlight when the rays first hit them each morning. Echeverria says the llama terraces may have been built as a symbolic offering to the sun god even when no actual live animals were available for sacrifice. That conjecture is one of a long list of suppositions about the site. Many myths exist around Chaquiquorao, says Echeverria. Indeed, Bingham and a number of explorers and researchers have floated theories about Chaquiquorao's origins, its relationship to other ruins, and the role it played during the Inca Empire. First, there's a foundation myth holding that Manco Inca, the 15th century Inca resistance leader, holed up in the citadel here for part of the 40 years he waged a guerrilla war against the Spanish. It is a nice story, but it has nothing to do with reality, says Echeverria. I have no doubt that Manco Inca was in Chaquiquorao, like he was at Machu Picchu, but it was not built for the resistance. Samuel Quispe, who has worked as a guide, and restorer at Chaquiquorao since the 1990s, posits that the complex was built by the Chanca, rivals to the Inca and the neighboring Apurimac region in the 14th and 15th centuries. Echeverria disputes that theory, believing the majority of the structures went up during the expansion of the Inca Empire in the 15th century. The cable car conundrum. Uncovering the llamas focused new attention on the ruins and created the most recent myth, one that continues to gain traction because of Peru's messy politics. Former First Lady of Peru Elaine Carp was instrumental in securing financial assistance to ramp up the restoration of Chaquiquorao. In 2002, now, she and her husband, former President Alejandro Toledo, are under suspicion for alleged corruption. While none of the allegations relates to Chaquiquorao, the controversy has thrown everything the couple did while in power into question. Rumors abound that Carp helicoptered into Chaquiquorao to fly out crates of golden artifacts. Carp did not cart off gold, but she did push for a cable car to access Chaquiquorao. In theory, the tramway could be good for Peruvian tourism and local economies, but it continues to divide communities, archaeologists, and politicians who must approve its funding. A potent argument, and one that has raged around Machu Picchu, is the impact of tourists on the ruins. In 2016, UNESCO threatened to put Machu Picchu on a danger list because of the number of visitors. A cable car system would not only bring more visitors to Chaquiquorao, but also the sort of infrastructure that might damage the fragile site. Some complain that mass access to the sacred site could spoil its remote, undiscovered appeal, and the grassroots tourism outfits that now bring people here. Melchor Apuga, who offers lodging and a restaurant in Chiquisca on the Apurimac side of the trail, worries the cable car would force her and others to abandon their way of life. We depend on tourism. The cable car would be like killing the roots of a tree and thinking the tree could live. We would not survive, says Puga. Quispe, now a semi-retired mule driver, says the cable car would eliminate the livelihoods of a range of service providers whose businesses would be bypassed by a quick cable car ride. One of his 7 children, Jose Luis, is a mule driver, while another works for the government project restoring more of Chaquiquorao's terraces. The family runs a small store and campground in Cacamisana along the trail. The cable car remains in limbo, but this doesn't bother most hardcore trekkers. The enticing thing about Chaquiquorao is that it takes time, so there is a commitment to do it, says Madison McDonald, 26, from Houston, Texas, who visited Chaquiquorao in May. Ritasuyo Travels Sierra says the government should focus on improving the existing infrastructure, instead of arguing over a cable car. Maintenance of the trail and better services would permit a greater flow of tourists and ensure local livelihoods. It would not be like Machu Picchu, but the people visiting Chaquiquorao are not interested in another Machu Picchu. Chaquiquorao is the perfect companion site. Finally, thanks for watching this video. See you again next time.